All right. Well, I'm back here. This is that CR-10 that I've been working on. If you recall, if you want to see the past video, this is a CR-10 that I salvaged. I wouldn't say salvaged, that rescued it from a guy's garage. It looked really worn, and it had a few flaws in it, you know, things that we had to troubleshoot. So I cleaned it up, fixed some faulty wiring back here. What else did I do? Or replaced the fans. One of the blades was broken here and it was rattling around, and replaced the stepper motor. And now it seems like it's printing okay, you know. And I just say okay. It prints like an unmodified CR-10, just a baseline base CR-10, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. So I was deciding, well, what do I want to do with this? Do I want to keep it like it is? And but given that I have very little money invested in this, you know, including my initial purchase from the guy on Craigslist, and then replacing the fans and that motor, you know, 110 bucks total I have into this printer, and I think it's a great candidate. It's printing fairly well now, but I think it's a pretty good candidate to upgrade it and bring it up to industry standards, I guess you'd say. Everything has all the bells and whistles, you know, as you go up the ladder. And I could take it, you know, and look at some of the latest, the CR-10 models, and say, okay, I want this, that, you know, whatever. But in this case, I'm going to do the dual Z rods here, and I think it's a necessity for a CR-10 because you have that wider footprint, right? The 300 by 300 by 400, I believe. But with this wider footprint from this attachment point from this Z rod, I mean, you've got a much longer moment arm than you did with the Ender 3. So this is the first mod I'm going to do. And you've probably seen it all before. There's plenty of videos out there showing guys doing this. But I'll go ahead and film it because I want to show you each modification that I do as I'm building up this CR-10. I'm going to bring it out of that garage and then bring it up to a really great performing workhorse, right? So this is what I'm doing. I've already got the upgrade kit, and it's all there. You can see there's the rod, here's the pieces, the motor, and they're really, you know, not that hard to do. Getting them on there, I think the main concern once you get it all installed is to tweak everything. Make sure everything's lined up great, make sure the motors are turning, you know, make sure this is level, you know, from far left to far right. Make sure, you know, just calibrate everything. I think that's something that really, and a lot of guys I've seen that they miss out on that. They can put together a machine, and I have two Ender 3s that do that. I got them from guys that put them together but had no clue on how to calibrate and, you know, and fine-tune it. So but let's get started. We'll go through this pretty quick and then do a test print. Yeah, so this one is just a generic kit. I got it on eBay. A lot of the stuff I get, you know, I'll go through AliExpress, or, you know, get them shipped in from China, you know, fairly cheap. But I didn't feel like waiting 4 or 5 weeks for it this time. So I found a pretty good deal on Amazon. And it was marked down a little bit, and it's just a generic no-name kit, right? So hopefully it'll do its job, and everything seems to be there. But we can go through and take a look. Oh, that's pretty nice. High quality bill of materials there, so you can hardly see anything. But so I'm just guessing that's that piece. Well, we can take a look. This is the top. This is the motor mounting bracket for the bottom. There's the coupler. There's the hardware, the cable. There's the motor. There's a few tools. And here's the bracket, the replacement here. Where does that go? Like that on the other side. And of course, there's the threaded rod. So everything's there. Alright, so there's no instructions with this, but it's not too hard to figure out, right? So the first thing, you look at the hardware. It's like, okay, you can figure out what's what. This goes up here on the X bracket here. You can see where that's where that goes, and they're lengthened so it'll reach across, and you can bolt this in. So that's a no-brainer. Here we've got the rest of the hardware. You can see the flathead screws going to here. This is the stepper motor mount, and it's real similar to this over here. You see on this other side. So just take a look. You can see where these screws go in. And what else? Then you've got the hardware for this top lead that goes here. So it's really not that hard to figure out of what to do. Now the question, what do you do first? And when I'm looking at it, you can start it and go from the bottom and work your way up to the top, right? It's some guys just directly start here and put this on. I'm just going to start here at the bottom, place the motor where it's supposed to be in the bracket, and then I'll work my way up. I'll take care of this here, and then I can take care of the top. And then the last thing to do, mechanically, that is to put the thread, the coupler and the threaded rod and everything, and get everything all lined up. Then last, of course, is the cable, the wiring, and it looks to be pretty easy. So yeah, so I started out just loosening up the eccentric nut, and getting everything where it can move a little more freely while I'm disassembling it, and that included the belt, just to loosen up the tension on it. And then I worked on taking the two nuts off and taking the wheels off. And once everything's out of the way, you can just move it out of the way and take the bracket off. But there are two screws. There's one on each side of that post that needed to come off. That's what's actually holding the bracket onto that aluminum extrusion for the X. But once it's off, it comes off pretty clean. And just keep track of your hardware and the wheels, because you just about use everything except just replacing the screws with longer screws. And definitely save that eccentric nut, but that's what it looks like. You can see how when you're tightening it wobbles back and forth. But yeah, save the hardware. I think it included the longer screws, and it came with an extra spacer, and I think it came with extra lock nuts also. But it's pretty easy to put together. You can see it you just put a spacer on each side of the wheel. And try to get that a little snug before you put it on. That way you can
and screw everything down, because it's kind of hard to get access to those screws if you don't do that first. But you can see it. When you're assembling, just put a spacer, wheel spacer, within the bracket. And, but after that, just tighten everything down and then tighten the belt. So now I was looking at, you can see the motor is mounted at the bottom, and it was time to put the coupler and the threaded rod down. And once you get it inserted, those I go ahead and tighten down.
Alright, all that's in place. I was going to put this this top piece on. It looks just about the same. It would go in that way or that way. Guess it doesn't matter, but when I was looking at it, I would take the bearing off. The bearing fits. The ID fits, but you can see how it's just rattling around in there. So, I mean, it almost serves no purpose if you're going to put up that on and still have your rod jiggling around. So, I took the cover off to see what was going on, but it's just an ill-fit bearing. So I don't know if I can find a spacer or a bushing or something that I can get in between there and take up that gap so that it won't just rattle around. Alright, well, I didn't find a bushing or any kind of spacer or anything, but I did find an O-ring. It'll fit that OD, and I think with the right pressure when we put the cover back on, at least it'll keep it from jiggling. It would probably still move under pressure, given that O-ring is just, given what it is, it'll just be more like a cushioned rattle. But at least it won't exactly rattle. But this will be a short-term fix. I'll look into it a little later. Well, everything's on. This is just snug. I didn't tighten it down all the way. I want to cycle this up and down first and make sure that this is level. I'll measure it off on both ends. But first we need to hook up the cable, which should be pretty easy. Alright, so here, there's the original cable. And I'll plug this pigtail into that. Now I'll plug this back into the motor. And I'll route this one over. I'm going to go underneath the frame. So that there won't be any interference. And that's why I put this plug facing out, so that there won't be any chance of any interference when the bed is moving. And how'd that go? That way? That's it. Easy as pie. So while I was playing around with this, trying to get a first print off of it, I kept getting failed prints, and it seemed like it wasn't sticking to the table that well. And when I kept trying to measure everything off and to see if this is remaining level and all that good stuff, I found out, I kept trying to level the bed, and I found out that the bed was actually moving a little bit. I went under with the wheels just like you do over here with the eccentric nut and tightened one of them down, and that seemed to stabilize it. I'm waiting for it to warm up now, and I'll try another print. But I also found that up here on the extruder, I believe it's slipping over here. When it was trying to pump some through, it seemed like it was under extruding. And so we have a couple of more problems that I didn't notice the first time around when I was cleaning this thing up.
So I took the extruder apart, and you can see all the scrapes and everything on the aluminum. It's where that the screw that holds that pulley down, when it was tightened down, it stuck out past the aluminum and was just grinding away on that plate. I was thinking, well, that could do it. I mean, that could be the reason why it's well, the spring isn't doing its job, you know. And then looking at the motor and looking at that that drive gear on it, it's like, wow, look at all the crap that was on that thing. I mean, so I guess with that, looking at it, it's like, well, I mean, what's it going to take to clean that off? And or is it damaged even further? Just about everything on that extruder just had to be replaced. And so I scouted around instead of trying to, I was trying to scrape some of that stuff off, but I looked at some of my spare parts, and I found a drive pulley and a spring. I believe these came off of an Ender 3 Pro that I had, and I switched over to the upgraded extruder. But you can see the spring, it's just slightly longer. You can see that one coil. But it is longer, and I don't know about the force on it. You know, you can squeeze it, and they're awfully close to each other. So without a force gauge, you never can tell. But I definitely switched over because it was definitely a little longer, and to keep that screw from going past and hitting that plate, I could have found a smaller screw, but I decided it would probably be easier just to find a washer to as a spacer and keep that screw from doing that. And when it was all assembled and it felt really good and solid, you can tell that spring is really holding the lever tight throughout the whole motion. Before, you could work it back and forth at that end, and that's why there was not enough pressure on the extruder or on the filament. But then while I was testing it, look at that, the whole thing was moving. I was like, oh man, look at that, these screws were not even tight. I did not notice that before, but yeah, isn't that something? So just had to go in and tighten everything up. I don't know, man, what did this printer go through? Did somebody take this thing apart and put it back together and just did a sloppy job, or was it like this its whole life? Who knows? Yeah, but it just tightened everything up, and when it was done, I mean, you could tell everything felt much more snug.
Alright, well, I printed off a few samples. There's the cube again. And it turned out pretty good. You can still, seems like I can still see some lines, but if I'm not mistaken, because this film is kind of a semi-translucent, what is it called? Silk red or something, and it's almost translucent, so sometimes you can see the fill inside. But this is not bad, and I don't see as much ghosting or anything. Maybe on this one edge, very little ghosting on it. I think it turned out pretty good. And I went ahead and did a benchy also, and it looks really good. I mean, looking around, you can see the body's in good shape. There's no artifacts. Oh, there's that looks like a seam here. There's a seam here, and there's a ghosting off of this little portal on this side. Not so much this side, but there is on that side. Where else? There's no ghosting here. Yeah, everything else looks pretty darn good. There's just that seam here. I have to say, it turned out pretty good, I thought. So I'd have to say, after putting on, when I very first got this thing, we did the fixes here with the fan and the motor, and I forget what else. There was we ran some prints and they were coming out okay, right? And I decided I'm going to go ahead and do some upgrades. I did the dual Z, which I guess it's arguable. I'm going to put the timing belt up here. I've seen online where other guys, they give the option, well, you can put the threaded rod here and you don't need a motor if you have the timing belt on there. I was like, well, I opted to do the separate motor, so we have two motors running in sync, and it does fine like that, right? But what I'm worried about is when the power's off, because right now the steppers are in place, right? When you turn the machine off and you can, rock everything back and forth, well, these can go back and forth separately, right? And not a whole lot, but I think it's enough where I'm going to go ahead and put the timing belt up here at the top. That way, with the power off and everything gone, and if this gets bumped or if this rotates, well, this one's going to go with it, right? Regardless. And that's probably one of the next things I'm going to do. But the biggest help was, while I was fixing everything, I was noticing other things that needed tweaking, right? The extruder, when I took it apart, I cleaned it off and I could see where I replaced that drive gear. It was pretty nasty. The spring, I found one off of a factory Ender 3, and it was actually a slightly longer spring, and that's exactly what this one needs. I took that off and I used a spacer up here at this bolt, so when I screw it in, it's not protruding out of the bottom of that aluminum piece. By doing that, it was just scraping the base aluminum and just rubbing it raw. There was so much friction there. But we got all that, and now the extruder is working great. It's not slipping. There's no problems with under extruding or anything. And when I got through with that and jiggled it around to make sure it was all good and tight, I noticed this whole bracket moved. Turns out these two bolts here on the wheels were not tight. I had to go back and tighten this up. So I went, loosened everything, adjusted the eccentric nuts on both sides, and just got them where they're even pressure, and then I went and trammed the ends to the base, and then leveled the bed. And now everything matches. It seems like it's doing great. So now if I just don't touch it and and rotate this around, it would stay there. I guess another option, because what is it, G34 or 32, correct me if I'm wrong, it's something like that, when I don't have a board that would support that right now. But that's another aspect with the dual Y, and it's essentially an automatic Y, an automatic Z leveling. So it goes through just like you're leveling the bed, right? Well, it takes the measurements, from side to side and adjust, the Z, levels everything out on this side, and then you're good to go. But I was thinking, man, I don't want to have to do that before every print, and that's why another reason why I'm going to go with the timing belt. And so then I can just, worry about just keeping the bed level. I mean, that's good enough. I mean, that's enough as it is. I don't want to have to go through and, because some guys go and level their bed before every print. I was like, well, especially, I mean, I have a few units that run production, and I don't have time to do that before every print. But that's the plan. So I'm going to put a timing on there, a new belt, and I haven't decided what the next upgrade will be. After seeing all this, I'm definitely going to upgrade this machine. I think it'll be a great base machine to start off with. And as I go, hopefully I'll find all the little loose nuts and bolts and anything else that needs to be fixed. But we'll see. Maybe it's a new board here. 'Cause I think, if I'm not mistaken, I have one on the way. I usually try to keep an extra board for my production units, so that just in case one breaks down, I can swap the boards really quick and keep production going, right? But I might as well take that and put it in here. So, well, I guess that's it. I rambled there at the end, but that's it for this video, and the next ones will be the next mods on this. We'll just keep track of everything I do step by step, and we'll bring this thing back to life. So, but I guess that's it for this video. So as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and watch my next video.